Hey there, Nick Jonathakas here. In this video, we're going to create both a database backup and restore script that'll work for both MySQL and Postgres with very little changes between the two. We're also going to go over how to schedule this database backup to happen at whatever interval that we want. For example, we can have this run every day at 1 a.m., or we can have this run every couple of hours. This behavior is going to be controlled by a cron job, so it's very flexible on whatever schedule that we want. In addition to that, we're also going to limit the number of database backups that we keep around so we don't have to worry about running out of disk space. For example, we might decide to only keep the last 14 days of backups, so we would have 14 individual daily backups, or maybe we can choose to keep the last 3 months of backups. That's really going to come down to how much data you have and how much you want to retain. So let's get rolling here. So right now I'm actually connected to a production server that runs some email software called Sendy. This is not really too important for the sake of this video, but just understand that Sendy is a PHP application that you can self-host on a server such as DigitalOcean. And it's a typical LAMP stack, right? Where the L is Linux, and I'm running Ubuntu 2004.1 here. The A is Apache, that's the Apache web server. The M is the MySQL database, or in my case, I'm actually running MariaDB because they're backwards compatible. And P is PHP. So that's how you end up with the LAMP stack. Now, typically, I prefer using Postgres as a SQL database for my own projects, but I'm not trying to start any flame wars here. Sendy has been working fantastic for me for a number of years, but I figured now, since I just updated to a brand new server, I updated some stuff, and now's a good time to go over some database backup and restore scripts because, I did have to use these recently when I just migrated servers. So let's get started here. And I know you can't follow along exactly because you don't have this code here, but that's fine. I'll throw this code up in a gist somewhere so we have access to it, and I'll drop that into the description. But inside of user local bin here, I have 2 scripts. One is the Sendy backup script, and one is restore. So let's go over the backup script first. And this script isn't very, very long. What is it, like 10, 15 lines of code? You can see down there in the bottom right, 15. But the real champion of this script is mysqldump. And if you've ever worked with MySQL before, this mysqldump command allows you to take the contents of your database and just dump it out to a .sql file. And then you can actually import that file to restore it later on. So what we're doing here, and we'll go over this stuff in a second, but let's focus on the mysqldump here. When we run this command, we need to pass in some parameters. So one, we have what is our database user, right? This will be whatever your database user happens to be. And then also when it comes to the password, you can pass it in here as well. And by the way, it's super important that you don't have a space between that P and whatever password that you have. If you do have a space there, then mysqldump is going to prompt you to put in your password. And then also finally, we have the database that we actually want to dump, right? This would be the name of the database. And then finally, also, we're just piping the output of that because normally this would produce like a SQL file, but we're piping the output of that to gzip, and then we're just redirecting that out to a file at a specific path here, like var lib sendy backup, which by the way, I'm also SSH here below. If we go to var lib sendy backup, then we do have that file right here. I actually set this server up yesterday. So, and I did a manual backup just to test things out here, but it's all good. But what this does, it produces this file that I have selected down here, and it replaces this subshell here with getting the actual day in this format, right? We have year, month, day, underscore Sendy, and then this is a gzipped file. So that's actually how we get our database backup. It's surprisingly pretty easy, right? It's like essentially a one-liner. I have it broken up into a couple lines because, it's a little bit long of a command. And this stuff up here is very super specific to Sendy. And let's get to it because, maybe you're not using Sendy, maybe you are, but you might use a similar strategy for whatever, database that you're backing up. So in Sendy's case, they have this one config file, config.php, and I happen to install Sendy here, so this is where it's located. And all I want to do here is extract out information about the database, like the database user, the database password, the database name. And when it comes to this config file, it is formatted in a very specific way. And I guess I can't, well, I could show you all this information, my database user and password and all that stuff, and it wouldn't matter anyways because it's blocked at the firewall level to be able to even connect remotely to my database. And this database user is also restricted to only allow connections from localhost. But I still don't want to share it on video just because, I don't know, who wants to share their database passwords on video. It's like, I'm just asking for trouble. But we can take a look here at this file. So if I go into var and config, well, here, and now I don't want to show everything. So let's just run this grep command here, like one of these, like at the database name. Okay, the database name, you guys got me. It's called Sendy. Okay, so if we run db name here, well, actually, let me just grep out db name from config.php. And I think that should just give us one line with just the name. Yeah, there we go. So we can see the format of this file, right? It's $db name equals Sendy, and all the other ones are exactly like this, but except for the user and the password. So what we do now, we just want to return, and this is what -o does, just whatever the grep match found. So in this case, it's just db name, because that's what we're grepping for, right? db name. But in our case, this is actually, some type of string that we want, like the term Sendy, and it's wrapped in quotes. So what this grep does over here, it's a little bit more specific, right? We actually have db name, let me put that in double quotes there. We have db name equals, and then we have single quotes there. Then we have this guy over here, which as far as I know is going to match any single quote. And then this will be any character, and then any single quote again, right? I'm not 100% on that, but I mean, that's how it behaves. If I run this, right, we can see we get this exact match now. Whatever it found here is the result that we see here, right? Very cool. Then we just run cut here, and I just cut that on the equal sign to get the second one out of there. And now it's like, boom, we have almost our database name. Like the last thing that we need to do is just use sed here. And let me clear this because I know my face is going to be blacking that a bit. And there we go. So what do we need to do now? We just need to pipe in, well, all right, there we go. There we go, recovered. So now we just need to pipe in this. So why am I even typing this, right? I'll just copy it there and then paste it there. And then we have our database name. So this process is being repeated for the database user, the database password, and they're getting passed in. Done. So again, you might not be using Sendy, but this type of like string parsing, I've got some other videos about this as well. Like, this is just using the power of Unix pipes to just get information out of files that you want. Great. So, and by the way, we could have technically hard-coded these values in this script as well, but that's sort of lame, right? It's like if this information changes, now suddenly you need to change it in the config. And this file here, now you have just files sitting on your file system that has potentially secure data. You don't really want to have that, right? Then if this were even hard-coded, I couldn't really even show it on video without blurring. Like, yeah, there's implications of putting secrets in files that don't really need it. It's worth the effort to do this. And by the way, if you watch some of my other videos, yes, there's like set E here to make sure that all these commands work. If any one of these fail, then it just won't continue in the script. And then pipe fail takes that one step further. And in the case like MySQLDump here, where we're piping to gzip, if this MySQLDump fails, it won't even bother trying to do the gzip part. So that's also another pretty useful thing to have in a shell script. And actually using pipe fail requires using bash. So that's why I have that defined over here as a shebang. So that is the database backup script. And if I go here and clear this out, and I go to var lib sendy backup, like that's where these backups are located, right? If I actually just, well, I don't need to even delete this, but take a look here at the timestamp, right? It says 1441. If I actually run the Sendy backup script right now manually, because this is a shell script, it doesn't need to be run in a cron job, I can just run this, but you do need to run it as sudo. There we go. And now if I do another ls here, before I hit enter there, remember 1441, now it's 1542. And that's just a difference of the system clock, right? If I run it again, well, it's still probably going to be 52. Well, I think maybe it just turned to 53. So let's see. Yeah, there we go. It just updated to 43. Sorry, not 53. But in any case, that is the backup script. And by the way, also, if your database were not run on localhost, if it's on like a different server or something like that, you can always pass in more command line flags here to connect to like a remote host, with a different port, et cetera, et cetera. You can always go check those out in the man pages if you'd like. Now, let's take a look here at the schedule of this backup, because right now, we had to manually run the script, and you don't want to have to SSH into your server and run this thing all the time. So let's take a look here at some of the cron jobs that I have sitting on the server. So you know what? There is certbot there because I'm using Let's Encrypt, but let's ignore all of these except for the ones that are the Sendy backup and Sendy backup rotate, because actually these other three are created by the Sendy tool itself. Like these are not things that I created, but these two are. So let's take a look here first at the Sendy backup one. And it's a one-liner. And by the way, you know, this idea of putting a cron job in etc cron d, in my opinion, is a lot nicer than running something like, you know, cron tab e and just editing the cron tab for the specific user, because now it's like we have this one spot on our system, right? This .d folder pattern is very common to include custom scripts for tools in etc. And yeah, we can just continuously add as many cron job scripts as we want. And all we do is we define when we want to run it. In this case, I'm running it at 12:30 a.m. And if I go to, what is that one site called? Is it like cron tab guru or something like that? Yeah, there we go. So if you put in minute 30, hour 0, then, you know, it just will let you know, like, look, you know, at 12:30 a.m., it's going to run it. Like if you wanted to really run it at 2 p.m., then, well, that would be 2 a.m. I guess 2 p.m. would be 14, right? I'm just a silly American here. I don't use 24-hour clocks, but cron does, which thankfully makes it even easier to configure, if you can call configuring cron easy. But you know, you can just start playing around with a schedule if you wanted to do it on a different interval. For example, you know, right now this would be every day at this time, but if you just do that, then now it's like, well, on day of month 1, so this would be the next time it occurs would be on September 1st. So once a month on the 1st, it's going to run this thing at this time. You know, the cron syntax, maybe I can do a separate video on that if you want, or you can just screw around with this cron tab guru site. It's pretty good with, you know, I'm one of those people where I just like to see examples and then I copy paste examples from Stack Overflow. And now I am a programmer with enough time at least. No, but in any case, yes, it is set up here to run every day at 12:30 as the root user. And what are we doing? We are running that script that we just took a look at, and we're just outputting everything to dev null, so we don't get any notifications about the cron script working or failing. That's a pretty common practice when it comes to cron jobs. Now, that is database backup, but it's not quite everything, I guess, because we should take a look here at that Sendy backup rotate. Because if we go into this verilib Sendy backup folder, right, I just only threw the server up yesterday, so there hasn't been an accumulation of files here yet. But on my old server that was up for quite some time, there were many, many files here. And that was totally cool. Like disk space wasn't really an issue in my case. Like if I do this here, we can see how much disk space is left on this server. Yeah, 21 gigs left on this one. And these database backups are quite small, right? This is like only 1.4 megs when it's gzipped. And yeah, I mean, I can store hundreds of these and it wouldn't really matter. So, but still, you know, I don't want to have to worry about disk space in the middle of the night. So I set up this one script here, which is the Sendy backup rotate, which really honestly isn't even a script. It's more just a cron job that is a one-liner. And this one I run at midnight every single month, like the first of the month, and it runs it as the root user. And what does it do? It runs the find command on this specific directory here, the varlib Sendy backup, and it's looking for files that have a modified time of greater than 90 days. And what does it do? It deletes them. And then the same like dev null pattern as before. So this is actually really cool. This is something my buddy told me about not too long ago, because I was going to go down the rabbit hole of creating my own shell script to do this logic, but I had no idea that with find, you can just pass in like mtime as a filter. That's amazing. So it makes this so easy to implement a script where it's like, yeah, just delete everything that's older than 90 days, and I'll run this once a month just to whatever, you know. I could technically have run this like once every 3 months to do it, but it's not doing any harm running it once a month really, because it's really only going to delete these files older than 3 months. But yeah, pretty cool stuff. So if you wanted to change this to be 14, then it would be 14 days, or you can do 365 days, and that will give you a year's worth. So by the way, if you're not familiar with the mtime and like the way it works, so if you run stat on a file here, like this one file here, then let me also make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, there we go. We can see the modified time is like the last, you know, when this file was last modified. So that's basically how this hooks up and works. And there's even ways to do things like, and I don't want to mess with this one file. Well, I guess I can just touch like an example file here. And take a look at this. Like if I run stat example now, we can see that the access time, the modified time for the example file is like right now, essentially. But you can also do sudo, well, I'm using sudo because these files are owned by root, but you can also do touch at. And I forget the syntax for this one. I shouldn't have put myself on the spot for this one. Is it year, month, day? I don't know. So maybe it is. I'm going to put 10 and then month 1 and then day 20, let's say. And then, I don't know, let's say 2 a.m. at 30. I think this is the right syntax. But now if you run the stat example, yeah, look at this. You can see the access time is 2010 now instead of right now. And it wasn't AT, it was MT. There we go. So if you wanted to like experiment with testing this type of script, which I did, by the way, and let me rerun stat example now, you can see the modified time is 10 years ago. So, you can just modify, create a couple files, manually set the modified time of them to be something else, and then suddenly you can test your script. And this worked very nicely as is like this. So cool. So that really takes care of backing up your script, making sure it's backed up regularly on whatever schedule that you want. Again, just as a reminder, that was that Sendy backup script here, every single day at 12:30 a.m. And then also we have the rotate script here, which just gets rid of all the old, the ones past 90 days. So backing up is now, I would say, a solved problem. So now let's take a look here at restoring. So I have another shell script here called Sendy restore. And if we take a look at this one, I'll open it with vim sudo in case I decide that I need to edit this file. And this one, a little bit longer because this one is also hell of a lot more scary. And this is fitting on one screen, by the way. There's nothing above this besides the shebang and things that aren't being showed, but it's not a big deal. Whatever, I'll show it just for the sake of completeness. Like, there we go, right? Same header as before, basically. So same exact pattern, right? Going through the Sendy config, pulling out the information that we want, but we need to supply some arguments to the script. So first off, it's like, where are our backup files located? And we just saw over here in varlib Sendy backup, right? That's where they're located. So when we run this this restore script, when we run Sendy restore, it's going to expect us to pass in a file name because this is not something you would run on a cron job. It's not automatic, right? If I just run this like this, it's going to say like you must supply a file name, example, and then it gives you an example of how to call the script with like a correct file name. And, when it comes to restoring your database, this is something that's going to happen super infrequently. This is going to be a manual task. This is going to be you probably, SSHing into your server and running the script. And, there's a lot of things in place here to make sure that things are set up exactly how you want it. For example, we have this if statement here, right, that we just saw an example of over here down here, where if you do not supply a file name, and we're doing, if -z here, make sure that we actually have something. If this is unset, then this condition is true. Then we just say, hey, by the way, you have to really supply a file name. And then I just do that date trick here to get the date time in the format that we want, just so we have a reasonable example. And then we exit one because the script was called unsuccessfully. Then if you actually do pass in a file name, like something like this, then, the next protection here is, we want to make sure that we actually have a file, right? So if we go and look for this file, but we actually don't have it, so if the file is not found, then we just echo out, by the way, this path isn't found, and again, we exit out of here. Then finally, and we haven't seen this yet, and, well, yeah, I'm reluctant to even run this one on video because I trust the script. The script has been used before, but really running this restore script, if I actually hit Y, like, if my brain auto-completes Y, then suddenly I'm going to lose all of today's data in that database, which would not be good at all. So I did open this with sudo, knowing full well that I'm actually going to modify this line, and instead, I'm just going to run like db was restored. Yay. And save the file. File is saved. Just let me save it again, just to be sure. There we go. But now, if I actually run this one command here, 14, sendy, blah, 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 we can now technically restore, and it is going to prompt me, first of all, right? This is what this read-p does in the top window here. And it's going to say, restoring is going to wipe your database. Are you sure? No, I'm not sure. And then it just says like the Sendy database was not restored because you didn't type Y or Y. I guess technically would be a little bit nicer. By the way, I can clean this up maybe, right? And just put like an empty echo there. And if I run it again, there we go. Yeah, that's a little bit nicer, right? This is not a script that I run every day, but yeah, it is definitely nicer to have the echo there. So right away, when I'm dealing with anything that's doing like database modifications like this, like a restore script, or I want to be super clear on every action that took place. So yes, I hit no. So it's saying the Sendy database was not restored because you didn't type Y or Y. And now in this case, like if I were to do this and hit Y, and again, it's going to scroll down here, it should say that the DB was restored. You know, that echo is going to be missing, so it's going to be on one line. That's fine. That's cool. So it says like, you know, DB was restored. Nice. So if this actually were executing what we should do here, which is taking that gzipped file, because let's go back to down here and take a look at this file, we can see that it is a gzipped file. We are using the zcat command, which will unarchive or unzip this file, right? And send it as standard out to whoever wants it. So we're going to pipe it into the MySQL command, very similar to our backup script. And we're going to pass in the same user, same password, same database. And that's how that works. So if you send in text as standard in to this MySQL command, then it'll just import that into your database. So again, like the value of Unix pipes, like it's so neat and nice to be able to just take the output of something and send it to the input of something else. Like this saves us from having to like manually use gzip to like ungzip the file into like a SQL file and then like redirect with MySQL, just, you know, doing something like this. And then if the file were named sendy.sql or something like that, like we could have technically done that instead of just sending zcat's output as input to here. But yeah, very cool. Like this is the restore script. And if you ever wanted to use something like this, then I will make sure to leave a link to both the backup and restore scripts in a gist so you can use them. And when it comes to Postgres, again, you know, they have ways to import as well. Actually, it's a little bit easier with Postgres for both the backing up and the restoring. You don't even need to really worry about gzipping a file. And I'll make sure to leave like a little overlay that actually shows both the backup and the restore in one shot, just so you can copy paste them. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. The restoring, again, is going to be a manual thing. Don't want to have that happening in a cron job. And actually, let me go back to putting this back to how it was before and double check, because this is a very important one. There we go. Cool. So if I go back to here, there's our scripts. Just as a reminder, you know, things are being saved to this one verilib Sendy backup. Of course, in your case, if you're not using Sendy, you can adjust all these file names to whatever you want. But I hope this gets you rolling here with database backups and restoring. This is functionality that is really nice to have automated, because if you're under distress, like something bad happens to your database and you need to restore it, you don't want to have to be Googling around like, oh, how do I restore a MySQL database? Like you want to be able to say, okay, go to server, input file name, execute script, hit yes, done. Like there's no thinking about it, because disaster does strike, and you know, it's super nice to have this stuff as automated as possible. Also on the topic though of backups, you'll notice that, you know, this backup script, it is just writing things out to disk, right, on whatever path that you want. So on DigitalOcean and other cloud hosting providers, there are ways to set up like block storage devices. So you don't need to save the file directly on your droplet or on your server directly. You can put it basically in what's essentially like an external drive, like separate from your server. That's nice to have, but you can also go one step further also and just back this up to something like S3, you know, like an object store. If on DigitalOcean, they have DigitalOcean Spaces. You know, there's other ones as well for different providers. But the idea there is the file wouldn't even live on your local file system. It'll live somewhere up on like a private object store. So that could be very useful as well. And the beauty about that is, like, if you just wanted to dump that to S3, let's say, then you just modify this code here, this script, to just add more lines to it that takes this file, copies it to S3, and then deletes the file locally if you want, right? And then honestly, those cron jobs to keep the files in check, they go away. Like you'll still want to do the daily one, but the rotating one, the one that actually gets rid of things that are like older than 90 days, if you're just saving it to S3 and not the local file system, then you probably don't even need that cron job. But Yeah, I guess the cool thing about that is like if you wanted that behavior, it's just adding more lines to the script. Everything else stays the same. So on that note, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up because it helps. If you have any comments or questions about the backup or restore procedures for MySQL or Postgres, let me know. Also, technically, you should be able to work with any other database. You'll just be swapping out this mysqldump command with whatever command your database has. And on that note, thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you in the next video.